Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Good afternoon, Tom. It's nice to be here for an interview with you in a virtual setting here. I thought today we would talk a little bit about some big picture topics. You often say, if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. And you also say, the truth is not fragile. So today, let's talk a little bit about how truth, facts, morality, and reality fit into my big toe. To start with, if you would, could you start with, if it's not your experience, it's not your truth?
Well, that's a good place to start. If it's not your experience, if it's something you're thinking about or talking about, but it's not your experience, then it must be somebody else's experience or something you just made up. Okay, if it's something you just made up, well, we won't go there. We don't have to talk about that just yet. But if it's somebody else's experience, then you can believe that experience, believe that somebody else's experience is true, but it's just a belief. It's not yours. Okay? And there could be a lot of things wrong with that belief. And that is, remember, we never get the source of the information, and we never actually get the intent of the information as it is sent to us. All we get is our own interpretation of the information. So if we get some information from somebody, we interpret it then to be something, and suddenly that something we interpret it to be becomes our truth. Well, you see, there's a problem in that. It's not even necessarily what the person intended. It's just the way we took what they said. Now, from the person who said it in the first place, look at their problem. They have an understanding that was, let's say, from their own experience. And they're trying to explain that to you. And whether they're putting it in written words or spoken words, they have to translate their understanding to language. That's never a 100% translation. They have to use the words that are in the vocabulary. They have to, in some way, paint a picture of the feelings and the soft aspects of it, not just the hard aspects. Now, if you're talking about a water glass, well, then that's easy. You can take a picture of it, you can measure it, you can see how much water it holds. That's simple. But if you're talking about, say, justice or beauty or love, then it's different. You can't just take a picture of it, measure it, and see what it does. So the things that are really not all that meaningful, you can be more exact about. The things that are more meaningful have a lot of uncertainty with them. So the person saying it, who had the experience, tries to put it into language, whether written or spoken. And that's maybe a 80%, 90% of what he actually understands. Because if he's really good at language and has a very big vocabulary, maybe it's 95 or 98% of what he felt. But if he doesn't happen to have a very, extensive vocabulary, maybe it's only 70% or 50% of what he actually felt. It depends on his skills with the language, both written and spoken. And when you listen to it, it depends on your skills with the language in reinterpreting it. Do you know what he means by the words he uses? Lots of words have 3 or 4 definitions. Many times those definitions are just slightly different. Sometimes we use different words for the same thing. And again, there's very slight differences. A lot of those differences are going to be personal, and one person will interpret them differently. So we see there's lots of uncertainty in you gathering an idea from somebody else, that you really do have that understanding. To say, oh, so-and-so said that this is the truth, and you just believe it. Well, there's a lot of problems with that. There's a lot of uncertainty in that. So it's better to be skeptical. You see, the core of this goes back to what we all need to be is open-minded and skeptical. So a closed-minded person would just maybe agree or disagree with that truth because it fits what he presently believes. So it suits him. So he believes it and says, oh yeah, that's truth because that's the way I think too. You see, so he has that, or it's not what he thinks already, so it must be wrong. That's the way most people are. So they sift things into those two categories. Oh, this must be true because that's what I think, and this must be wrong because that's what I don't think. Well, that's a pretty biased viewpoint of what's true and what's not if it comes from outside of you. So that's why I say that if it's not your experience, then it's not your truth. It may be somebody else's truth, but it's not your truth. Be skeptical of what you get. Secondly, let's say it is your experience. If it is your experience, then you have the understanding of it. Whether you're good at expressing it in language or not is not the point. It's your understanding. And that's your truth. Now, if you have an experience, like many people do, let's say you have an experience and you had a headache, a really bad headache. So you drank some water with lemon in it and your headache went away. And you did it again and the headache went away the second time. And now you start saying, I know how to get rid of headaches. All you do is drink some lemon water and the headache will go away because now that's your truth. Well, you need to be a little careful. Yes, that's your truth, and it happened twice. 2 points. Don't define not even a trend. It's just a couple of points. And very few of us ever have experiences that are repetitive enough and careful enough to eliminate other variables such that we can actually do a scientific assessment of whether our experience is telling us something true, like lemon water will get rid of your headache. Because in order to do that, you'd have to have about 1,000 samples. And you'd have to keep really good statistics on those samples. And then it would have to not just be about you, but it would have to be other people. You'd have to gather thousands of samples from other people and see whether it always works, sometimes works, always works for some people, but never works with others, etc. Then that would become science. And sometimes you think that science makes truth, but that doesn't either. Science makes facts. Facts, in a way, are a little different than what we generally talk about truth. Okay, so even if it's your own experience, you need to be careful not to put more, not to believe it, but to be skeptical. So you're always skeptical when it comes from somebody else, and you always should be skeptical when it comes from yourself. Because you too have beliefs, and you too will dismiss data that is contrary to your beliefs and latch hold of data that is in consonance with your beliefs. Whether that data is right or wrong is not the point. You believe it's right because it is in consonance with your beliefs. So always be skeptical of everything. So what truth do you know? What can you say, this is the truth? Well, I'd say almost nothing. Almost nothing at all. And that's because when you are skeptical, you assess things by probability. All right, I've had these experiences. I've taken lemon water for my headache 50 times now, and it always works. So I might say that I can get rid of my headaches with lemon water. May or may not work for anybody else, but it works for me. Okay. Is that a truth? No, because you don't know about the next headache. Maybe it won't work then. So we almost never, even if it's 100 times, I've done this and it worked. And it has never not worked in the last 3 years. Is that a truth? No. It might not work the next time or the time after the next. So all you can say is that drinking lemon water generally takes my headaches away, and it has for a long time. But claiming it is an absolute truth is not true. Even if it's just for you, it's not your truth either. But it's probably a 0.99 or maybe even a 0.999 on your scale of things that are true for you. But very few things will ever get that probability of 1. Yes, this always and forever shall remain true. That almost never occurs. And on the opposite end, we should have about the same attitude toward that probability of 0. When we say, oh, this is impossible, this will never or ever come to pass or happen or be a good thing or whatever, that's pretty risky too. Better to just say, well, I don't see any use for that, and I don't think that will ever come to pass, and it seems ridiculous, and I'll give it a 1 in a million. Well, 1 in a million is not 0. It's 1 in a million. Give it 1 in 100 million or 1 in a billion. But there's very few things that actually should be given zeros of probability that these things are false. You see? So you often also hear me saying that we have to live gracefully with uncertainty. You see, the world is uncertain. Even our own world is uncertain. The worlds of other people are uncertain because we all live in our own reality. What they mean by what they say is what it means to them. It's not what it's going to mean to us when we process it ourselves. So this idea about truth, that out there is a truth, and that this truth is solid and this truth shall prevail for all time, that generally is not a good position to take. It's much safer and much more likely to be helpful to you to put truth into probability. This looks like a good idea, and it seems like the right way to go, that I'd say 99.9999% of the time that's going to be the right way to go. But there will likely become an exception where that is not the right way to go. Something you never thought about, something that never occurred to you, some other possibility. So learn to live gracefully with uncertainty. People have trouble with that. They don't like uncertainty. They want things to be solid and fixed so they know, okay, these things are true and these things are not. Now I'll march on through my life knowing those things. Well, those are just beliefs that these things are true and those things are not. Most of those probabilities of 1s and 0s are beliefs, you see, because by definition, whatever it is you believe is what you think is true. Whatever you believe in your mind are facts. That's the nature of belief. I believe it. You see, that's kind of what the word belief means. You accept it, you believe it, it is. And belief is one of those things that gets us into trouble. So that's one aspect of truth. Now let's look at facts. Okay. Now, if I say that this brick is, 8 pounds, well, that's not going to be the truth, because if you weigh that brick to 15 decimal places, it's unlikely it's going to be 15 point with 15 zeros after it. Very unlikely that that's going to be the case. So that's not true. But if you say this brick is about 8 pounds, that's a fact. You see, this brick is 8 pounds is not a fact. it's not true. This brick weighs about 8 pounds is a fact. Now, about is a not very clearly defined word. How much fuzz do you allow in that about? Does that mean anywhere from 5 pounds to 10 pounds? What's your about? Or does it just mean plus or minus a half a pound? When a brickyard makes bricks, it tries to make them say it 8 pounds or whatever it does. I just made that up. I don't know what brickyards do, but they have a form, and they have a certain density of material that they use. But that density varies, and that form isn't always exactly the same. And it changes with time, and everything changes. So they make bricks that are about, let's say, 8 pounds, but really, they're not. Occasionally, maybe they come out close, but they're all over the place. So we do have facts, but facts are only available about stuff for the most part. Facts are about stuff. So facts can be about other things, but things that are subjective that we call facts, there may be facts in our own mind, but they don't really suit the fact, definition. A fact should be a fact to everybody. This is a fact, and everybody should find that to be a fact. So everybody that weighs these bricks should find them to be about 8 pounds.
You're right about a physical thing. We should realize that if nothing physical that we can measure is exactly right, then how much of the rest of it is? And how would you recommend people navigate through information to find what is fact and what is not? That seems to be more and more difficult, and it's being presented that way for a particular reason, no doubt. But that is one of the more elusive things. If we can't actually have a fact of what something weighs, how do we navigate through something that is an intangible kind of fact, something that relies on how someone inputs something or how someone interprets something?
Sure.
Using the word loosely, but how would you navigate through that?
Well, that's kind of a crux of the problem that we have, and is a source of a lot of dysfunction in the world. And that is, facts are mostly about stuff. Okay, the brick and how much it weighs, or the brick and how much volume it has, or, whatever. What is the temperature outside today? Well, we say, is that a fact? Well, no, depends on where, right? The temperature inside your house is different than the temperature outside your house. And the temperature in your basement is different than the temperature in your attic. And, the temperature is just different all over the place. So what is the temperature today? Is that a fact? No, that's not a fact. You can't say, well, today the temperature was 75 degrees. We say things like that, but they're not facts at all. Facts are something like the brick weighs about 8 pounds. That's a fact. So you can have facts about simple things. Simple things. What's the color of this car? Well, this car is red. Well, what's red? Well, we can make a definition. A wavelength of light from this frequency to that frequency, we will call red. Anything outside that is not red. If we make that definition, now what's red is a fact. If it's inside those if the wave, we just get a little wavelength measure the light and say, that's red or that's not red. We can make a fact out of it. But what about somebody's interpretation? Somebody looks at it and they say, well, it looks red to me. Well, they may or may not be inside that little definition. They may be calling something that seems red to them that actually isn't in the, inside that narrow definition of what red is. And what kind of red? Fire engine red? burgundy red, wine red. We got all kinds of reds going on in there within that frequency range. They all exist in there. So now we can argue over words. I say something is red, and somebody else says, no, that's not red, that's burgundy. Or that's, who knows, there's probably lots of words for red. So you see the mess we get in as we try to communicate with each other. We speak as if everything we speak about are facts and things that we know. What we don't realize is that most of them are not. So the things that are simple and just stuff, material, what we call material things, these things, we can make facts out of them, like the frequency that's defined as red. Not what people think is red, but the frequency that's defined as red, or the weight of the brick. These can be facts. But when it comes to how much do you love me? Is this just? Are you being fair here? All of those things, we can never really make facts out of those things. Just like the color red, is this fair? Well, you can probably find some people that say, yeah, it's a fact. That's fair. Yes, that's a fact. It was perfectly fair. But you probably find an equal number of people would say, no, that's not fair. It wasn't fair at all, because they're looking at it from a different viewpoint. And they would say that it's a fact, that it's not fair. So are these things really facts? No, they're not facts. There's things we pretend that are facts. Anything that we kind of believe or agree with or suits us, those are the facts. The stuff that run counter to our beliefs and the things that don't suit us, come to conclusions that we don't like, whether it's fair or unfair, then those things are not facts. There's somebody who just doesn't understand. That other person has a belief, but of course we have facts. So the fact that it really is fair, I know that that's a fact because I say that's fair. And you know that that's not fair from your perspective, and you know that it's a fact that it's not fair. You see? So none of these things are really facts. They're not facts at all. Yes, the brick weighs about 8 pounds is a fact. The color red is between these two frequencies. That's a fact. But when we talk about it, when we have conversations, when we discuss things, particularly if it's not about stuff, if it's not just talking about the shape, size, and weight of things, then we very quickly get to a point where there are no facts. There's only opinions. I think it's not fair. Now, we have to understand that these opinions have a lot to do with our fear, our ego, and our beliefs. That's at the root of these opinions that we have. So everybody has kind of their own opinion, and everybody talks to everybody else as if their opinions were facts. And one of the great things that we could do with our children, probably starting about third or fourth grade, all the way up through as high as you want to go, we should be giving them courses and education on how to separate opinions from facts. What's the difference? We should give them education about critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skill number 1 is, what's the difference between an opinion and a fact? That's something that most of us really don't pay any attention to. So you go on the internet and you have all these people saying all these contradictory things. Oh, yes, this is a good idea. Oh, no, that's a terrible idea. Oh, COVID is a really serious thing. Oh, no, it's just a made up thing. You have all the stuff, and everybody saying it believes that what they're saying are facts, because they don't understand that you need to be skeptical about everything. And you need to be most skeptical about yourself.
I was just thinking, when you're speaking of facts are difficult to discern for some people, fact between fact and opinion. I don't think that statistics should be one of those things that's based on opinion. Now, that is dependent on a lot of things, whether the actual statistics are how they're gathered, how they are interpreted, how they're put forth, how they're input into databases. So one thing I'm thinking that you cannot really argue with is a statistic. You take a survey between so many people, and this percentage says this, and this percentage says that. That should be somewhat of a fact. That should be a fact.
It should be, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And the reason it isn't is that you can change just a single word on a survey. It depends on how you ask it. It depends what order you ask it in. If you ask questions in a different order, you'll get different answers for them. It depends on the ambience of the questionnaire, how it's presented, all of those things, the presentation of it. Does somebody hand it to you with a smile, or is it in, it makes a big difference. You can modify the output of a questionnaire by any number of means. That'll make it different. Just change one little word that almost means the same, but it carries just a little different emotional content. If it's this way, then that way, and your whole results will be different. So the problem with statistics is that, one, we have to understand that statistics don't apply to anybody. They apply to an ensemble of people, right? They apply to a group. They don't really apply to any individual. Averages only apply to an ensemble, not individuals. So that's one thing. So though you have statistics, they don't say anything about individuals. They say only about groups of people. There's so many variables that the thing is, good statisticians that aren't just trying to do propaganda, not trying to just make a point that they want to convince other people it's true because they believe it. But good statisticians will give you error bars around the variables that they don't control. In other words, that's just good statistics, because statistics don't ever show you an exact answer. They're not about exact answers. They're about sampling, and there's always sampling errors, plus there's errors due to other variables that can't be controlled. So again, you should always be skeptical of the results. But if you have a good, honest statistics crew, then they should be able to give you a good overview.
As I presented the question, and you've given me this example, it occurs to me that there is so much controversy over people saying these are inflated statistics, this or that is inflated. But to me, it always seemed not really the issue. So what is the important thing? The important thing is how you often say, how are you dealing with this? Not these arguments over who's right and who's wrong on which statistics, because there is purposeful misinformation out there. And the one thing that people who are in favor of misinformation and confusion that would like to see is just dividing people over anything.
So we have people who use opinions that they call facts, statistics that aren't really facts either. They use these things because they have everything has variables in it that are unknown. Uncontrollable variables exist in almost every measurement that's made statistically. It's very hard to get situations that are so simple that the statistics are just perfectly clear. When you do things like COVID or anything else that's polling for how you're going to vote, there's going to be underlying errors in your thinking because there's going to be variables that are significant that are just not being controlled. So that's always the case. So again, you have to look at all of those things look at the trends, look at generally what it's saying. Don't look at the details. The details are unimportant. Well, you shouldn't have points to make. You see, if you've got a point you're trying to make it seem high, you're trying to make it seem low, all of that is wrongheaded. You need just to let it be whatever it is. And that would simplify an awful lot of the arguments if people weren't up to here in beliefs such that they want to make their arguments sound stronger. So they grab hold of details and other things to try to make their side sound better. And it's true on both sides, the upside, the downside, on all sides of every issue. You have people that are straining to make their side more important. As long as you have people wanting to boost their own ideas versus somebody else's ideas, as long as it's a competitive thing, you don't have cooperation. Competitiveness is, when you're competing in a race, you're not cooperating with the other racers. You are trying to win. And as long as people are in the mindset of, here's what I think, and I'm going to try to make that the most acceptable way. So you start with a bias, and now you work hard to make your bias, which is what you believe. You don't see it as a bias, you see it as your truth, to make that more dominant. So until people stop seeing everything as a fight, everything as a struggle, everything as a competition, everything is me against you, that's the problem. If we see the world as me against you, then there's always going to be this. And the only way to change that is to change people's perspective about what's going on. It's not me against you. Let's just kind of look at what is, and okay, statistics plus or minus, here's what it is. It doesn't matter really exactly what it is. What is it saying? What's the big picture telling us? That sort of thing. So we look at it in perspective, we talk about it, and we'll have disagreements. But if we come from the place that disagreements are okay, everybody's allowed to have an opinion. Let's have the opinion, and let's let those other people have their opinion, and let us have our opinion. But let's all just, do what we have to do, but in a positive way. It's not a competition that my team's trying to get your team to agree with my team.
And it's
vice
pretty
versa.
much what they're doing, yeah. Unfortunately, I think you hit on a very important point, and that's perspective. You often emphasize, because of your concept of the virtual reality, and we live in a subjective individual reality. 7.5 billion people or more live in their own reality. An example that comes to mind is someone witnessing, 5 people witnessing something, such as a car crash. 5 people will give 5 different accounts. They see things differently. Certain things are, this is where you lose some of the facts in the perception. But there's a point where something has to come together. In that collective set of 5 people who are witnessing things, something has to come together to give a bigger picture.
Well, most of what that coming together is just opinion. Some opinion and some set of beliefs will eventually dominate. The same thing happens in a court case. Most court cases are not decided on evidence alone. Most of them have, attitudes and history, and lots of things go into defining whether somebody's innocent or guilty besides just the facts on the table. Because typically, there's very few facts on the table It's A murdered B at 3 o'clock in the morning behind a bush in a park where nobody was. You see, and there aren't any hard facts that show exactly. Now it's who could have been there at that time, who's the kind of person who would have done that, who's, who lives in that neighborhood and inhabits the park, and you get all kinds of things. People get scooped up. Somebody gets charged, they run them into a jury, and the jury decides whether they're guilty or not. And that has little to do with facts, because there are none, and a whole lot to do with the beliefs and attitudes of all the people involved. It's the attitudes of the prosecutor, attitudes of the police, attitudes of the jury, attitudes of the lawyers, attitudes of the general population. All of those things will make a big difference. And mostly that's the kind of stuff you say it has to coalesce into some kind of a result in what happened. Well, it does coalesce into some kind of result, but as we know, it's not always right. A lot of people who are innocent, end up getting convicted because they have other things that are not in their favor, like their race or their financial status or some other kind of thing. And it doesn't always work out. So again, we need to be more aware of the uncertainty and of the bias that we walk around with. We have to be more aware of how little we actually know and how much of our beliefs are based on opinions, and not even opinions out of our own experience, but opinions that we've gotten from things we've read. Other people's opinions become our opinions, you see? And we just don't realize that. We think that, we read this on the internet and that on the internet, and in our mind, that's truth. You shouldn't do that. It's just a possibility. It's not truth. And if everybody had these things in their mind as possibilities, then we could maybe meet and talk about them. And yes, have people on this side and that side who would disagree, but we wouldn't feel like we had to punch each other. We wouldn't feel like we have to scream at each other and call each other's names. We wouldn't have this polarization where one end detests the other end. One end of the pole says the other end's the problem. Both ends say the other end's the problem. We wouldn't have this situation where conversation becomes impossible. You can't really talk about it because people aren't willing to talk about it because they're so wrapped up in their beliefs, their opinions, their certainty about things that have no certainty. So
in your theory, possibilities are really all that exists. Is that right?
Pretty much. We have possibilities and we have the probability of those possibilities. So things are possible. A lot more things are possible than there are things that are probable. See, all kinds of things can be possible, but they're not very probable. Like right now, a meteor may come into our atmosphere, burn down to the size of a basketball and land on this room that I'm in, and we'll all vaporize. That's possible. It's just not very probable. So we don't worry about it. So there's lots of things that are possible. So we look at the possibilities, and then we have to assess those as probabilities. And we do that in very uncertain ways. Our assessment of the probabilities have to do with our beliefs, our fears, our ego, our knowledge. How much knowledge do we have? How much do I know about meteorites? How many of them are up there? How many come into the atmosphere? How many get to the point that they're still the size of a baseball or a basketball when they get to the ground? How many times does something like that hit the earth? And what's my little room worth of earth versus all the rest of earth? What kind of probability that it'll land on me and not someplace else? You see, we can use our intellects to try to assess that probability, but however we assess it, there's a lot of guesswork involved in that. So even our assessments have to be looked at skeptically. Say, well, okay, I kind of think it's not very likely that a meteorite's going to fall on me. I mean, I'm 75 years old, one hasn't fallen on me yet. So I think it's unlikely. I've never heard of anybody that one's fallen on. I've never read about it anywhere, ever. You see, and if something happened like that, I probably would hear about it. Something happened over in Russia once. And first they thought it was a nuclear blast that went off, and then they think it was a meteorite that came down and exploded. I can't remember, but it was many, many years ago. All the trees were blasted away, or some kind of big blast happened, some massive blast. And one theory is that it was a meteorite came down and hit. So it's not like it's impossible, because we have geological evidence of it. We know it's possible. Gulf of Mexico is a big crater where something hit there, and we have lakes, Crater Lake, that does the same kind of thing. So it's possible, but we can't get too wound up on what's possible. We have to look at what's likely, and we have to realize that our set of probabilities of what's likely is just a guess, and it's a very limited guess based on, like I say, our knowledge, which is good. More knowledge will be better guessers. Our experience, more experience will be better guessers. But also our fear. Our fear will determine how we guess. Our beliefs will determine how we guess. Our egos will determine how we guess. So all that stuff determines how we guess too. So when we come to conclusions, those conclusions need to have big plus or minus error bars on them, and we shouldn't take them too seriously. And if somebody disagrees with us, rather than wanting to punch them in the face because they're the problem, we need to talk to them and say, yeah, well, maybe, let's see, tell me your arguments, and I'll do your arguments with my ego and my beliefs and my fear. And I'll say, well, your arguments, I think, are maybe a 5% or 3%. I think mine are like a 80%. So I'm going to disagree with you on that. But we could maybe talk about it, and he could maybe convince me that his arguments should be given a higher probability, and I may shift him around a little bit. But if I immediately, he comes to a different opinion than me, so he's wrong and I'm right, because I have this big ego that says I'm always right. If I've come to that conclusion, then it must be right, because I only come to right conclusions. I never come to wrong conclusions. That's, if we start out competitive, I'm right, you're wrong. We start out, there's only one winner here. Only one of us can be right, rather than neither of us really have all the information. Both of us are just guessing at what's going on. We're all guessing. The reporters that we read their work, they're guessing at what's going on. Even the scientists who are doing the surveys, they're guessing at what's going on too, because there's variables they can't control. Everybody's guessing about what's going on. So maybe we need a little more tolerance with other people disagreeing with us, and a little more ability to listen to what they have to say, so that we can change our probabilities that we give things. And if we don't, okay, let us have our sense of what's right. Let them have their sense of what's right, and let them own it. Let them have it. Don't turn them into the enemy that has to be, wiped out. It shouldn't be that way. It's not like everybody disagrees with me is wrong and needs to be killed. That's kind of crazy. People that disagree with me, well, that's okay. They just disagree with me, and that's allowed. They have their opinions, and we need to be able to sit and talk with each other about why we have those opinions.
And we've talked about truth and how elusive that is, and how we really don't have enough facts to state a truth. But also, you have said the truth is not fragile. And when you speak of that, you're speaking of something on a higher level of truth, other than what we are speaking about here.
Right. When I speak about the truth is not fragile, what I'm speaking about is, in time, things become more obvious. When you're in the moment, everything that's happening now, everybody's guessing. Well, what's going on here? How many, what's happening? 20 years from now, we'll know pretty much what happened. Well, okay, the historians, will have their own biases and their own things, we won't know exactly what happened, but we will have a better idea of what actually happened 20 years from now. So in hindsight, we're a lot smarter than we are in foresight. When we are arguing about the future, or even the present, we're not really all that informed as we think we are. We've got lots of ideas with lots of probability that really is not nearly as strong as we think it is, because we tend to be believers and we believe that things are true. We don't understand that most everything is uncertain. Very few things are true, and we don't. Anyway, that's now. 20 years from now, hindsight's much clearer. They say hindsight's 20/20, right? That's the way it is. So eventually, the truth comes out. The truth is not fragile. You know, we'll know even a decade now how serious this COVID-19 was, because it'll all be over and it'll be done. We'll know roughly what it did to the economy, what it did to people's lives, what it did to whatever, you know, how it affected us as a culture, because things like that, big things, leave marks in our culture. They change our culture a little bit. You know, people who grew up in the Depression had a whole different attitude toward, you know, finances and spending than people who did not grow up in a Depression. It changes us. So, you know, we'll be able to see that from the future. But right now, we're all kind of arguing with very few facts, a lot of beliefs, a lot of probable, you know, a lot of probabilities that we have personally put on things based on our own stuff, our own, you know, fears, our own knowledge, whatever. So we have all this stuff, and the truth tends to come out eventually. It's not fragile. So I said that mainly when I was talking about physics. I was talking about physics, okay? Physicists come up, let's take Albert Einstein, comes up with the theory of relativity. The physicists of his day look at it and say, that's ridiculous. Things get heavier, you know, things get more massive as they go faster, time goes slower. All that stuff's ridiculous. Who could think any of that? You know, things actually get shorter in the direction of motion as they go faster. Nonsense. Couldn't possibly be that way. But of course it was that way. But it took a while. The first time Einstein gave his paper, everybody didn't stand up and applause and go, oh, that guy's a genius. You know, it didn't work like that. So that guy's crazy. Get him off the stage. So, but if it's true, then, you know, the truth is not fragile. It'll come to the top. Well, 20, 30 years later, experiments were done. And sure enough, time dilation, time, you know, length contraction, mass increases, all those things were measured. They're facts. They go from the probabilities down to facts. They were measured. Those things do happen. And suddenly Einstein became the genius. But he didn't start out that way. So the truth is not fragile in that as time goes by, things that are true, particularly in science, will rise to the top. The truth always comes to the top eventually.
Also, yes, I can see your point there. And I hope it applies to what's happening now. I talk to a lot of people, I read a lot of people who have the intention of moving in a positive direction from all of the dysfunctional things that we have lived through over the last century. They simply want to move in a direction of, you know, equal justice under the law. They want equality for people, more concentration of care for people, rather than simply satisfying certain agendas to please wealthy people. I mean, I think that is a truth. Whether you agree with any kind of politics or not, you have to head towards caring about others, or you're not on the right track, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, that has to do, it takes us into another phase of this discussion on truth, and that is morality. What's right and what's wrong? Now, morality is a simple measurement of entropy. Now, what's difficult about that is entropy is not always easy to measure. And it's not only a measure of the way the entropy is now, but what it will be. So events, things, attitudes, it's not so much the things done, but the motivations for those things done. Morality goes with the intent behind the action, not necessarily the action. Now, sometimes the intent and the action are closely related, but sometimes they're not. So, I often give the example of, the person who sees somebody lose a $20 bill and keeps, falls out of their back pocket and they keep on walking. And if they go pick up that $20 bill and they look around and they say, oh, look at all these people see me pick up that dollar bill, saw that person lose it. Everybody's going to know that I'm going to steal it if I put it in my own pocket. And some of these people may know me. Some of these may be my friends or people that know me, maybe even my boss. I better go up and give it back to them. Otherwise, I'll get caught. I'll be known as a thief. That wouldn't be good. So they go up and give it back. All right, well, they've done the right thing. As far as actions go, they saw the $20 bill fall out of the person's back pocket. They picked it up and they returned it. So action-wise, they're moral, but not really. They didn't do it for the right reason. Morality goes with the intent. The intent was, I would like to steal it, but I don't want to take the punishment that would come with stealing it, which is other people thinking less of me. That would be the punishment in that case, that other people would think less of them for knowing that they were a thief. So that was the wrong reason. They did it out of fear, not out of caring. Not caring for that person lost something and they want to return it, but fear for themselves of having to deal with people they know, knowing that they steal things. So it's not just in action, it's in intention is where morality is. So if your intention, and of course there's always subsequent actions that follow intentions, but if that causes a net decrease in entropy of the system and includes you as an individual, so you and the system both have to have a decrease in entropy. So if the system has a decrease in entropy because of it, then that was a good thing to do. If the system has a net increase in entropy, then that was a bad thing to do. So we can define good and bad in terms of entropy of the system. Now, the system is trying to evolve the quality of consciousness. To evolve the quality of consciousness, it needs to move toward being love. Okay, not acting loving, but being love. So that's where it's going. That's its place. And if you're running counter to that, if you're being fear, if you're being, if you're crosswise and in the opposite direction of being love, then it's not a good thing. If you're in that direction, then it is a good thing. So we can break morality down to that level of good and bad. So in that place, yes, morality is absolute. It's absolute and it's not individual. You can't say, well, it's moral for people in this culture to do this and that, and it's immoral for other people to do that. Well, we have cultures that make up their own rules, and it's okay with the rules in this culture. It's not okay with the rules in that culture, but that really has nothing to do with morality. People can make up all sorts of rules, but it doesn't change basic morality anymore. Morality is not a rule. You don't make morality by making a rule. Okay, rules are something else. We can make up rules. We can make up a rule that says lying, cheating, and stealing and murder is okay. That's a rule. Now, does that suddenly all become moral? No, it doesn't, because those are all high entropy things that cause dysfunction. So we have in what is good and what is not good, good and bad, they're defined at a higher level. It's not in what we think. And there's really no uncertainty in it, in the sense that if you could do that entropy calculation, you could say for certain whether this was, in the best interest of the system, in other words, lowers entropy for the system, or whether it didn't. Or it could be neutral, could be so close to being equal that, okay, it raised entropy a little, it raised entropy a little, it raised it and it lowered it both, and it came out as zero. Well, then it's neither good nor bad. It was in between. And many of the things we do are like that. But if they just lower our entropy, but increase the entropy of the system, no, that won't work. It's the whole system has to evolve. And we're a piece of that system. So what's good and what's bad becomes, at least in the MBT view, becomes very straightforward entropy measurement. The uncertainty comes in and how you measure that entropy. Again, hindsight is a lot better than but the way MBT handles that is you do the best you can with due diligence. You think about it, you try to take the low entropy process, the low entropy solution. And if it doesn't work out that way, it turns out to have been a high entropy solution, well, you learn from it. And that's how you grow up. You make mistakes and you learn from it. So that's okay. So it's not that everybody who does things that are high entropy should be shot. It's everybody that does things at high entropy should learn from their mistakes and grow up. And that's how the whole thing evolves. So doing things that are high entropy are lessons that we should learn. And usually they have feedback, because usually we do high entropy things, we're not happy people. That comes back and bites us in many ways. We're unhappy people who feel a lot of pain and are not feeling joy, not feeling bliss, not feeling content, peace, satisfaction in our lives. We're all wound up and angry and upset and growling and fussing and fuming. And that means we're not making good choices. We're not doing things right. We're not doing things for the right reasons. So the morality is a key thing here. Yes.
How does it all fit together with your concept of reality? How do all of these things fit together?
Well, reality is then, you see, it's another one of those things. We talk about, good and evil, good and bad. It's like these two opposite sides, and what's good and what's bad. Well, I just explained that has to do with entropy. We talk about truth and lie. This is a truth and this is a lie. We want to break things into two opposite things. And as we said, this truth and lie, truth is really a very fuzzy ball. It doesn't really have clear distinctions, because a lot of the information we need to make clear distinctions isn't available. We don't have that yet. We don't know how it's going to work out. You see, so that truth is a kind of a fuzzy thing. And if that's a fuzzy thing, the lie is probably less fuzzy, but it's still, those things are mostly in the eye of the beholder and mostly based on people's fear, ego, and beliefs. What they think is true and what they think is false has more to do with individuals. There's only a few things like that are true, and we call those facts. That's the brick that's about 8 pounds. That's a fact. But other than that, other than facts about the stuff, there's very little that you can put as absolute truth and not truth, because we just don't know enough to make those kinds of choices. Now, when it comes to morality, is murder, a good thing or not? It's true that murder is a bad thing. Well, now, yes, because murder tends to be high entropy, murder, killing somebody. But there's probably some aspect where killing somebody is not. It's a low entropy. Let's say some person who's a psychopath, sociopath, going around and killing people, and they killing everybody. They kill this person and this person and this person, and you see that and you're able to stop it. And the only way to stop it is to kill that person that's killing everybody. Now, you could stop it, and now they won't kill the other 20 or 100 people they were going to kill. If you hadn't stopped it, they'd have gone on and killed all these people. So now in that case, all right, killing that person was the low entropy path. So you can't just come up and say, killing people is wrong. When we start making these statements like that, these blanket statements that are about action, not about intent, but about action, then there's always loopholes. That's the probability that philosophers have had over the ages with making moral codes. They make all their moral codes in terms of actions that are moral and immoral, and there's always holes in them. Somebody can always come up with a story that says, well, what you just said in your code doesn't always apply. It's not always true. That's because they're making it based on actions. If you make it based on intent, say that one person who was just murdering everybody, their intent was one of destruction, one of high entropy. The other person's intent, though what they did was kill that person who was murdering everybody, their intent was one of low entropy, stopping destruction, you see. So if it goes back to intent, then of course that makes sense. And you can make a moral code based on intention. Anybody interested out there, they can find it on the forum, MBT forum. If you look for moral codes, you can look one up. But anyhow, so the thing with reality is the same. It's one of those things, we like to polarize it, true, lie, or true, false, and right, wrong, and real and not real. The reason we do this is because we're simple-minded and we don't like to keep things that are complex in kind of probability space. We like things to be cut and dried. It's simple. We want things to be simple. Look at this. Is this true or false? Pick one. It's like you have to pick one. Believe it. I believe it, it's false. All right, from then on, that's a fact and it's false. Or I believe it's true. From then on, that's a fact that it's true. So we make choices like that because we can't stand living with the uncertainty of not knowing. So we feel obligated to pick something and then believe that that is a fact and that that's true. So it's because we're simple-minded that we want things to be simple. We don't like complexity. We don't like dealing with things that have uncertainty because of their complexity. So we simplify everything by making beliefs about how things are and whether they're good or bad, true or false, real or not real. So what's real and what's not real? Information is real, period. And this is a virtual reality. Everything in this reality is a result of information. The only thing that is fundamental is consciousness. So consciousness is fundamentally real, let's say. Everything else is virtual, virtually real. So it's a virtual reality. The only thing that's fundamental is consciousness. So consciousness is an information system. Consciousness is about information. Information is as real as it gets. So when you're in a virtual reality, the reality you see is information that you get that you're interpreting. The information is real. If you're in a daydream, that information is information you're making up. You're creating that reality in your daydream. And you're getting that information. Within that daydream, you can make choices. Oh, in that daydream, I'm going to wrestle that bear to the ground and save the princess, whatever. That's in your daydream. Well, you're making those choices, and those choices, like any choice anywhere, helps you evolve or not evolve, depends on what your choice is. You could run away from the bear, let the bear eat the princess, not your princess. So it just depends on the choices that you make, how you evolve, whether it's in a daydream, a night dream, in this reality, in an out-of-body state, it doesn't matter. Your consciousness, you make choices and you evolve by your choices. All of those, daydream, night dream, out-of-body, this physical universe, they're all virtual realities. It's all nothing more than information. So by saying this virtual reality is the real reality, and those daydreams and night dreams and out of bodies are all junk, it's just all stuff people make up. They're not real, but this one's real. That's just prejudice. That's just prejudice. So people do that, wherever they are in their stuff, that's the real stuff, and everything else you discount. But it's merely prejudice. They're all different kinds of realities with different sorts of purposes, with different kinds of rule sets meant for different kinds of experience. But all experience is valuable in growing up. Matter of fact, that diversity of experience is important to growing up. So we have these diverse virtual realities in which we interact in. This physical universe, daydreams, night dreams, out of bodies, lucid dreams, remote viewing. We have all these other spaces that are experiential that we can make choices in and grow up in. So again, is this real or not real? It's really not a good question. You know, that's really not the point. The point is, what's its value to you? What can you learn from it? That's important. Is this true or not true? Well, there's maybe more to that, but for the most part, that's not the point either. The point is, what can you learn from it? Where's the value? What's the low entropy place there? You know, that's what's really important. You know, is this, you know, if you do things and they turn out to be high entropy, you know, is this good or is this bad? Well, that's really not the point so much as, oh no, I've been a bad boy, you know, that's terrible, or I'm good, pat myself on the back. It's, what do you learn from it? If you do things that are low entropy and things work out good, you should learn from that too. How could you do them better? If you do things that are high entropy and it creates a lot of dysfunction in yourself and others, learn from it. Change yourself. You see, so it's not even the good and bad that's the deal. The deal is, what can you learn from it? So we have such energy put into truth or false, real or not real, right or wrong. Whereas what we really need to put into it is, how can I grow from this? What can I learn from it? How can I become better? Not how can I win? How can my side beat the other side? How can I prove that my side's right and they're wrong? When we approach everything with hostility, with competition, with I'm right, you're wrong, then we're never going to be very happy people. We're always going to live in a high stress world. That high stress will make us ill, will cause all kinds of problems. We'll have backaches and headaches and, you know, hurt shoulders, and we'll have all kinds of illnesses of all sorts, heart problems and strokes. And a lot of that has to do with stress. Stress is the culprit behind many of those illnesses. Yes, they have physical manifestations, but all of those. And I should include depression. You know, depression is a stress-related disorder too, for the most part. So if we come to the table always about I'm right and everybody that disagrees with me is wrong and needs to change. And if you have all 7.5 billion of us looking at the other 7.5 billion minus one, saying I'm right and everybody else has to change and think like me, or my group, me, and here's this group that thinks the same as I do, everybody else needs to change. And that's the problem with the world. We got the right answer and everybody else has the wrong answer. Well, when everybody thinks like that, you have everybody pointing the finger at somebody else, blaming them for what's wrong. And that doesn't help anybody get it any better. If you want to make it better, stop blaming everybody who's different than you as the reason that it's wrong. Start looking at yourself, getting rid of your fear and ego and beliefs, getting rid of the things that you think are absolutely true, you know, all the ones and zeros that you've created, and that these are absolutely the way it is. Let all that go and see, how can I grow from this? How can I be part of the solution, not part of the problem? That is the way to approach these problems, not with anger, not with a shaken fist, not with you're the enemy. Because there's just as many people on the other side of that looking at you saying that you're the enemy. And all right, you can get in a fight, you can all get guns, and the last person standing is the one who was right. No, it doesn't work like that. Violence doesn't prove what's right or wrong. That's an old idea that's been discredited a long time ago. It doesn't work. So that's kind of where we are with truth and falsity, with right and wrong, and with real and not real. And you see, they're all kind of tied together.
They are. Thank you, Tom. I hope this discussion on truth and facts, morality, reality moves people towards thinking about a positive direction, thinking in having a positive attitude, and moving towards more caring of others.
I guess my closing words would be, if you find yourself in a reality where you are upset much of the time, angry much of the time, full of stress much of the time, you do not feel satisfaction in your life and what you're doing and how you are, you don't feel joy and peace as an everyday part of your existence, then if that's the way you are, and you don't have the joy and the peace and the satisfaction, then that's because of your beliefs. And that makes you a part of the problem, but also probably a part of the solution in other areas, because we tend to be a little bit of both. Most people are kind. Most people do care. Most people tend to be pretty good as far as their attitudes about life in general, but they let themselves get wrapped up in these truth, false, real, not real, right? Good, bad. They get wrapped up in these things to the point that they're now acting out of fear, ego, and belief. And that makes their life full of unhappiness, stress, pain, misery, dissatisfaction, stress, and all that'll kill you. All of that just makes you unhappy. So if you find that you're in that unhappy space of constantly fighting, struggling, you're on one, there's polarization and you're on this pole and all the bad guys are in the opposite pole, then the problem is really you. Not the idea that you can point your finger, they're the enemy. If we could just get them straightened out, everything would be okay. The problem is with you. You can only change yourself. You can't change them. Yes, the problem's with them too, if they're also not happy. On that other pole, those wrong people are unhappy and they've got their anger up and their fist in the air too. And that's their problem and that's theirs to work on. But you can't fix their problem. You can only fix yours. So make yourself happy. Find some joy and peace in your life. Let go of the anger. Just be, enjoy, have fun. And if that's not what you're doing, well, change it. Because it's a whole lot more fun if you don't have that fear pushing you all the time, that anger. So peace and goodwill, folks.
Thank you very much for this discussion. Fantastic.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.